Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the By Word Show. I'm so glad you're here today. You guys, I'm so excited for this episode. I was just telling Danielle before we sat down and hit record. I feel like every time I sit down for one of these interviews, it ends up being exactly what I need to hear. Like, it's so funny how God does that. Today, we've got Danielle Olberding with us, and she's going to be talking about trusting the Lord, leaning on Him. And I just feel like this is a lesson I can never hear too much about. I'm constantly just coming back to this. So, anyway, all of that to say, Danielle, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the By Word Show. For those who don't know you, would you just quickly kind of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I am super excited to be here. But I am Danielle. I am a postpartum doula and lactation counselor. And I just really dive in with moms and just help them in all areas of postpartum when it comes to prep and just kind of figuring out what do I do with that because there's always so many questions and really guiding them after baby comes as well. And I've been doing this for, gosh, almost 6 years. So it has
Wow.
been just incredible. It's been such a rewarding experience. I am super excited to get to help moms from all over that just need that support.
That's amazing. Well, and you guys, that's kind of how we connected actually. And we've just started talking. She's been helping me with postpartum prep, and we've just started talking about our faith as well. And so I just felt like it's such a needed conversation. Like, I feel like for so many women, it's easier said than done. Like, oh, I want to grow my faith. But when it comes down to actually trusting God and inviting Him into the day to day, like giving up that control, like what that actually looks like and
Yes.
requires from us as far as trusting and surrender, like that's another story. And so I would just love to hear your story and like what your journey with the Lord has been and how you have grown in your faith and just depending on Him in the ups and downs.
Yes. So it has definitely been a journey. I'm just going to give you the whole spiel. I
Let's
was
do
in a
it.
relationship. This is my testimonial that I share with everybody, but I was in a relationship for 2.5 years. I thought it was the person I was going to marry. Like we talked about having kids and just all of the things. He was not a believer, but he was open to something. And so I thought in my mind, okay, like it's fine. Like I'll be able to get him, get him going to church with me and all that stuff. And then just little by little, it just was like not working out. And so I just realized, okay, like this probably is not it, especially since, I want to be with somebody who has a shared faith and believes in God and somebody that I can have those deeper, like, conversations with and just holding each other
Mm.
accountable and like talking about, how is God working in your life right now? Like that's so important to me. And so we ended things, and it was really, really hard. But that was a moment where I was like, okay, God, like, what do I do now? Like, I felt like my whole life was flipped upside down. And that was really like the truest moment where I had to really surrender. I had no idea what my life was going to
Mm.
look like moving forward. I still remember I went to the beach. I live in Huntington Beach, California. So I'm not too far from the beach. So I was like, okay, that's like my place to go to like watch a sunset. So the sunset that night was so crazy. It was beautiful. And I sat on the beach and just cried. And I was just like, I don't know what's going to happen, God, but I trust you and just show me the way. I don't know where I'm going, but just show me the way. And I feel like from that moment, when I really put my full trust in Him, my whole life changed like very
Wow.
quickly. I had reconnected with a friend that I hadn't spoken to in a long time, and her and I decided to join a bowling league. And I never would have done stuff like that before. So I was just like, sure, like I'm just going to plug in. Like, I just want to get out of the house. Like, I don't want to be focused on like this breakup and figuring out what life looks like. So I just started like reconnecting with people that I hadn't spoken with in a while. And there was another girl that was like, hey, like, I just joined. It was like a Christian singles group. It was called the 20s and 30s crew. But she said, I know it sounds kind of silly, but this is a group that's kind of going on in my church. And she said, I know that like you're very faith-based as well. And like you want to connect with people who are also Christians. And she said, I'm going to try this. Do you want to do it with me? And I said, Sure, like that sounds super fun. And so I reconnected with all of these people and I jumped into this group and it was a lovely, lovely group. And they all went to this church called Mariners every Sunday together. We all sat together. It was awesome. And then I started really going back to church. I used to go to a church called Rock Harbor. And when I was dating my boyfriend at the time, who wasn't a believer, I stopped going to church for 2 years. And before I
Mm.
met him, I was going to church every Sunday. And so I was like, okay, this is a problem. I need to plug back in. And so I remember the first time I went back to church, I just cried. And I was just like, okay, like this is where my life needs to be. I was just like back home, like if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's kind of like where I just really got reconnected with God again, was just plugging in with these people and just meeting new people, going back to church. And then I still wasn't really sure where I was with just dating. And so I really had to pray about it, but I felt ready to like move forward because I'm just like, I'm not going to meet my husband if I just like, sit here and feel sorry for myself. And so it was New Year's Eve. And I promised myself at the start of the new year, we're not going to feel sorry for ourselves anymore. And I'm going to live my life, but I'm also going to put myself back out there. And then literally 2 months later, I got on Bumble. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a dating app. uh,
Yeah.
so I got on Bumble and I met my now boyfriend like 2 months into doing that. And we've been together for almost 4.5 years now and planning on getting engaged and
Wow.
married. So yeah, it's crazy what God can do.
Yeah, that is, and I love hearing those stories because when you're in those seasons where it's like, I thought this was it. It seems so good. Or like I've been in that same place before where it was a relationship where I thought it was the one
Yeah.
and it was so hard for me to believe I could ever find somebody else. Or if it was a job, it was like if I leave, like was this my one opportunity? Like I'm scared to let it go because what if there's nothing else on the other side, and it's so hard to take that step, but then you commit to the process of trusting the Lord, and all of a sudden, here you are years later, and you can't imagine what it would be like if you had held on to that rather
Yes.
than trusting God and letting go and letting him lead you to something better. And so it's so encouraging to hear that because it is easier said than done,
Oh yeah.
but
Oh yeah.
it's always worth it. And I feel like so many women, maybe it's just like a human thing in general, but it's so hard for us to give up the control because we want to feel like we have that sense of security, and
Hmm.
we want to feel like safe and like we know what's going on. And so when it comes to trusting God, that's been a struggle for me, is whether it's a dream I have, a relationship, my health,
Yes.
my family, finances, anything. I feel so scared to let go because I'm like, what if God doesn't come through? So what has your experience been, or like maybe talking to other women as well? Why do you think it's just so hard for us to let go and trust God?
This is something that I mean, I think we all struggle on some level with this. And this is something that I really struggle. I was just telling myself the other day, I'm like, you need to let go of the control. I think it just like what you said, like it's just like that sense of wanting to have like security and feeling secure. And I feel like when we just kind of let go and rely on the Lord to just come through, it's just like all of that is kind of just thrown to the side and you don't really have that security and you're just like, okay, but like is God going to come through? Like, when is he going to come through? And it's just that unknown, I think, for a lot of people. And it's like when you have
Yeah.
that control and you're trying to plan your future and figure out what does the future look like, it makes things so much worse. And I feel like that can actually produce like so much anxiety for people. I mean, it has for me as well.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I really think though that that is why people struggle, is just they struggle with the unknown.
Yeah, oh, definitely. And I can relate to that in pretty much every season of my life where
Yeah.
it's just I'm so scared to let go because what if it doesn't work out? Or if it's like a dream, or if it's like something with my kids, or, even finances. I'm like, I feel like I just need to figure this out. Like, I just need to, figure out how to put the pieces together and we'll be fine. Or like, maybe I need to work harder. Maybe I need to do this more. And it's usually the last thing on my mind to just be like, okay, Lord, I just surrender and I'm just going to wait for your time. Like that is so hard for me because like something I've been learning in this past year is like faith is detaching yourself from the outcome and
Yes.
like letting God take over that part. And that is so scary.
Yes,
It's so
it's really scary,
scary.
and it just makes it really hard when it's like when you're trying to like figure it out, you're relying on your own strength and you're not letting God come in
Mm,
there to like take that and help you with it. You're just like, I got this. I can do it all by myself. And it's like, no, you can't. Like we're not meant to do everything by ourselves. Like God is trying to come in and help us, but if we don't surrender, then it just makes you have
exactly.
anxiety and you're just like, oh my gosh, like, do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? And you're trying to like pile on, like, I need to work harder. I need to do this. I need to do this. And it's really like, no, just be still and let God come in and help you. I remember I listened to a podcast like years ago and it's always stuck with me, but he was saying something along the lines of like, we are co-workers, like God is like the boss and we're the coworkers. So it's like whatever you have going on in life, like move your feet, but also like do it with God. And
Mm,
it just that's always stuck with me. I'm like, okay, like I'm gonna move my feet and do what I need to do, but ultimately God's the one that's gonna show me, is this right? Is this not? And God's gonna be the one that's gonna come through and help me.
that's such a good way to put it because you're right. Like that's so true. And when we are doing it all on our own, it completely strips away the relationship aspect, which is the most important thing to God, which I
Yes.
very, very easily forget. Like I'm very much like, I can do this, independent girl. Like, don't worry, I got it. I'm fine. But when I do that, like even in my relationship with my husband, I see how when I try to put all the weight on myself
Hmm.
or lean really deeply into my own independence, like it robs us of relationship to grow together. Or like
Yeah,
you know how it is in a relationship with a friend or something. When you struggle together and you are able to commit to stick through the hard stuff together, it makes you so much
exactly.
stronger. Like
Yeah.
and we just it's a bummer. Like it's silly that we miss that. And like you said, it always leads to anxiety and overwhelm and frustration and exhaustion, burnout when we depend on ourselves. And why wouldn't we want to choose the opposite, which is just waiting and trusting in the Lord?
Yeah.
But that's hard. And
Yeah,
so
I
it's
feel
funny
like
to
everybody
me.
wants like that instant like gratification too, where it's like if I do it myself,
Yes.
I can get it solved faster. And I feel like a lot of people are just like impatient. It's like, I mean, with God, like waiting seasons, like you just don't know. Like, I mean, some waiting seasons can be short, some can be super like years even. And I just feel like a lot of
Yeah.
people are not willing to like really rest in that and they just want to figure it all out by themselves.
That is such a good point because something that I have been processing through, and I mean, you guys know I've talked a lot about how I've had miscarriages or even things like in my business or my husband's business, we're both entrepreneurs and like paving our own roads. But there are times when I just feel like God, what's the holdup here? Like we're praying for our breakthrough. We've been faithful. We've been doing all the right things on paper. And I've almost perceived it's like I've perceived the waiting as punishment. When a
Hmm.
lot of the time it's not. Like it's just it's either preparation
Yes.
or it's just a lack of trust and not being willing to take a step back and say, okay, God, what are you doing in the season? Instead of just, okay, like okay, what else do we need to do? Like, we need to figure this out, like rushing the process. Like you said, it's so hard for me to wait when I'm like, I see the solution. Why can't we just get there?
Yeah, especially too when it's like seasons like that in your life where you're, trying to figure out like as I know so many women struggle with that with miscarriage and infertility and they're just like we have been waiting for years, what's going on? And I mean in like through those years of waiting, like I know that those are also moments when God is really shaping you the most and really
Mm,
just shaping you and growing you for all of the things that you need to actually be like fully prepared and ready. And that's something that I've had to also learn myself too is God prepares us and God gives us what we're wanting when he knows that we're ready for it. So
mm.
even when we think we're ready, it might not be in God's timing.
That's so good. Kind of going back to your story, I think a really good point that you kind of made was the idea that sometimes we don't get to the point where we're totally desperate and ready to trust God and surrender control
Yeah.
until we're at rock bottom, or like until everything's falling apart. But what has it been like for you now coming from that point? Like you talked
Mhm.
about how you started reconnecting, getting back into church and community. How did you take that moment of faith, that pivotal moment, and then kind of bring it with you in the journey now into your day to day, like where you are continuing to trust God just on a normal day, not like at rock bottom, I guess, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, because it's like I mean, obviously you lean on God in the hard times and when times are really good too. I mean, it's so important. But I mean, I feel like life sometimes just gets really busy. But when I'm in a busy season, like right now, I'm in a crazy busy season, like with my business and trying to like get all of the things sorted. So when I'm driving to work, I will use that as my prayer time. If I know like, hey, like I've got a busy day, but this is kind of my only quiet moment, I will sit in my car and I will talk out loud to God and just I mean, I talk to God like I talk to like a best friend. And I'm just like, God, I know that you know all of these things, but this is what's going on. And like I'll just start my prayer too. It's just like, thank you for this day. Like this is such a gift. And I'm excited to see how you're going to use me with this day. And I always pray for just like presence and patience because I'm a doula. I'm working with families and babies, and that requires a lot of patience and flexibility.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah, but it always makes me feel so good though when I start my day with that. And I'm starting my day thinking about God and sharing just all of the feelings, all of the emotions, and also just acknowledging like what God is doing in my life and just really praising and thanking Him for that. And it just always starts my day off on a positive note. When I do have time, I actually like to do devotionals. So I have the Jesus Calling devotional. I love it because
Mm,
even if you've read it a million times, like it's a whole 365-day thing. So it's like new almost every time when you read it. But
right.
I will just read that and kind of like meditate on it, pray over it, and then just kind of think about like how it's kind of pertaining to like what I have going on in my life. And then I journal. And so I almost kind of like I love to pray and talk out loud to God, but I also will journal and almost like write like little letters to God in my journal. And then I love to flip back through it and see like where my seasons of waiting are. And also just answered prayers that God has already answered. And it's really cool.
That's so beautiful. And I agree. That's such a good tool to use. I have done that in seasons before where it's just pouring out my heart and I can look back and just see, oh my goodness, I thought I was never going to get past that season.
Yeah.
And God, look how faithful you've been and how far you've brought me. And it's just, it really is amazing to be able to process that way and then have a record where you can look back and tangibly see. Because I feel like that's one thing that I've noticed in my own life is I'll pray and pray and pray and wait for the thing. And then God is faithful. He shows up. And then I'm like, yes, thank you. Okay, I got it from here. And then I kind
Uh-huh.
of go back to doing my
Relying
own
on
thing.
yourself. Yeah.
Yes, it's like, okay, God, I need you. I need you. I need you. And then he shows up and it's like, okay, thanks, I'm good. And now I don't need you anymore because life is great. And then it just again disconnects from that relationship. And so what I've found is so transformational is for instance, last year when I was going through all my miscarriages,
Mhm.
it was the first time in my life where I felt so desperate and like honestly had no other choice but to trust God and like take the pain, take the really hard questions to him. And I can look back on that season and honestly say I'm so thankful for it because I think it was what it took to get my relationship with God to another level where it was like, okay, Lord, it's not just about like me praying and you answering and like meeting needs like a transactional thing. It's like you love me and you're with me and this doesn't make sense and I don't know the outcome and I don't know the timeline, but I know that you're good. And so that for me was a different way than I've experienced it because I think a lot of times Christians can feel like when I'm in crisis mode, I lean on God.
Yes.
And when life is good, I'm on my own. Like I'm soaring, like I'm good to go, don't need anything else. And so the fact that you have just consistently like you have those things in your day, even if it's simple like praying in the car, I love that. Like that's such a simple way to stay connected all throughout good days, bad days, ups and downs, everything in between.
Yeah, and even, like, all throughout the day if you have to. I mean, truly, like, this could be another story for another time, but just being a nanny slash doula in somebody's home, I've had many moments where like I feel like touched out and overstimulated, and I have a screaming baby that has been screaming all day long, and like I don't even know what to do to get them to calm down. And I've tried all the things, and like there's moments where I'm like, Lord, help me. Like, what do I do? And just even like praying for peace and to just like take the stress away so I can have a more clear mind to kind of solve and figure out what's happening. So I always encourage people like have your day like where you have your time with God, but also like God wants to be a part of your whole day. And so just even like God doesn't want like just the good of like, oh hey God, like thanks for today, like this was such a great day, or hey God, like I'm struggling. Like God wants all of it. And so if it's a happy moment that you're sharing with him in the day, that's great, but God also wants you to come to him with just the God, this sucks. What do I do? So
Right.
I try to just be mindful of that, because I feel like when I'm in my like anxiousness and oh my gosh, like how do I handle this? And I'm trying to figure it out on my own, like that's really in the moments like when we need to say, God, help me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like it's just I love the idea of just coming back to him throughout the day because
Yeah.
I know for me, when I start to feel overwhelmed, when I start to feel stressed, I immediately turn inward and I can't see anything else except my pain or my
Yes.
problem. And that prayer of like, okay, Lord, I just need help. Like it turns our eyes back to him and we realize, oh my goodness, okay, like it's not the end of the world. Like, I don't know, going from focusing on our problem and that's all we see and it seems so big and impossible to getting our eyes back on Jesus and realizing, okay, you're still in control. I don't know what to do here, but give me peace, help me in this moment, and even that simple switch, I feel like just keeps you connected and keeps your perspective. And that always helps me like trust him more because I remember, okay, yep, this is really hard, but it's not up to me. I'm not doing this alone.
Yes. Yeah. And I think again, like that is such an important reminder, because I think so many people feel like they are alone. And
Mm,
just if you don't have that super like connected relationship with God too, like I feel like that even more so makes you feel like I'm living this life alone. Like, does God even hear me? I know a lot of people
yeah.
struggle with that, but yeah, I always encourage just talk to God. Even if you feel like God doesn't hear you, He does. Just talk to Him any time of the day. Like He's always, always listening.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I'm glad you said that. And since you work with moms, I'm sure you have walked with women through so many seasons of transition and
Yes.
busyness and stress and health journeys and all kinds of things. So, what would you say are some of the key things you encourage mom or just women in general to do to keep their eyes on Jesus when life does get crazy or when hard times come and there's extra stress or whatever it may be?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I have had quite a few conversations. Even one of my good friends is actually a mom too. She has two little ones, and her and I were actually just talking, and they're just stressed out with just trying to find a home, and they want to have a third baby. And she was like, I'm just so stressed out. And I was just like, like you have to like surrender. She's also one too who, I mean, I tell her all the time, we're so alike because we're just we're almost like control freaks. But yeah, it's like you're trying to kind of map out, what does my life look like? What's the timeline look like? And it's just, there really is truly no such thing as timeline. Like we can make all of the plans, and then what do they say? You make your plans and God laughs. Um,
Yeah.
and so I mean, aside from her and just other moms that I've talked to, like I always just say, like you have to surrender. Just, I mean, even in the day to day when you're working with kids, like even I've done that where I have like toddlers and I'm kind of trying to control how the day goes, or with a baby, like I'm trying to control like how well they sleep for their nap, and it's just like, it just causes so much unnecessary stress, and we just have to just let go and just give it to God and surrender and just figure out how to keep going about the day and just trusting that you're going to get through it.
Mm, I love that because especially when we are around kids, because I mean, y'all who are moms know motherhood It's wild. Like,
Yes, it
toddlerhood
is
is a
so up
whole
and
thing.
down.
But one of the sweetest things for me lately has been seeing our son, who's about to be 4,
Mhm.
walk with us through this pregnancy journey, and, I mean, he's seen me on some bad days where I'm just out, like, I'm drained, I don't feel good, I'm at the end of myself, and then we pray. And so, like, our son now has seen us throughout the day, like, if there's something hard or, like, we've been, searching for a house as well, and we'll pray as a family, we'll pray
Mhm.
before we make a decision. And it's so sweet now because we'll be playing outside or something, and if it's windy, if my son is digging in the dirt, he'll be like, "God, please don't let the wind blow over my pile," or whatever it is, and I'm like, that's so funny, but also, like, that's really sweet that he thought to, in that moment, like, pray. And
Yeah.
so it's been really sweet to me when you kind of see, I mean, it's different when you're a mom because you kind of see your kids mirroring your response
Oh,
to
yeah.
stress and overwhelm and to
Yeah.
God. And to me, I was like, "Whoa, that's so crazy," because I wasn't doing it to, like, get him to do it as well, but you know what I mean? Like, it's really cool that we have the example even in friendships.
Yeah.
If we're stressed, we can say, like, "Let's just pray about it," or in marriage or whatever it is, just, "Let's pray about it. Let's get back to the Lord together." And it makes relationships so much stronger, and there have been so many times in relationships, even with my husband, where I'm like, "Man, why did we stress about that for so long? I wish we would have just prayed about it from the beginning because then it's not like we're at war against each other or with the situation. It's like we get to
You're
come
in it together.
together."
Yes.
Yes, and just trust God. And so that's the amazing thing too is when you're in relationship with people, being able to do faith together, like you were saying with the community you started getting back into, like that makes it even easier for you to stay connected to the Lord throughout the day to day and busy seasons and transitions and all of that.
Yeah, and just being able like, something that I always share with moms too, like, just having community in motherhood and just being able to have somebody that you can reach out to and share your struggles with, and having somebody that's, like, also willing to just, like, pray for you.
Yeah, that's amazing, and it's been so sweet. Like, if you guys are listening and you're like, "Oh, I don't have anybody in my life that I could think of," I would encourage you to find somebody. Like, I have friends who live out of state, but we've just connected in a season, or like, a mentor or somebody here that I can just text on a hard day and say, "Hey, I need prayer." I don't know what to say, but, like, I just know that I need prayer, and it's so helpful to have people like that in your corner. It's so powerful to have people in relationship who are fighting with you in prayer and then can check on you and love on you through the process.
Absolutely, and I know it's not always easy. I feel like it's so hard as an adult to make friends now,
Yes.
but I was just gonna say too, like, if you don't like, because I know some moms are just busy and they don't have the time to join, like, an actual, like, mothers group, or maybe you just don't really have a circle of friends that are close by, or maybe if you've, like, previously moved, like, there's just so many different situations. Or
Right.
sometimes you're just in different seasons of life and you just don't really see people as often. An app that I really love is Peanut. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a motherhood app. I am
Yeah.
on there as a doula, and it's so crazy. And this was a total God thing because I have been praying so much over just meeting new women, because I have a lot of close friends that have actually moved away and have, like, gone on to get married, and we just don't see each other as often. And so I'm just like, God, like, please just allow, like, for just some time to, like, dig into, like, making more friendships and connections. And so I have one girlfriend that I have met through the Bumble app. They have a dating one and also a friendship one, and so I jumped on there. This was like almost 2 years ago, and we've been friends, like, just such a quick budding friendship, and she's like my sister. It's so crazy. So her and I have been chatting. We're like, let's meet, like, more women. So I was praying over it, and I haven't even been actively trying, but in my Peanut app, it can connect you to women who are in your local area. So I always tell moms, like,
Mm.
jump on there. And I know it's not always easy to, like, put yourself out there, but they have, like, different, like, templates and, like, prompts that you can use to start a conversation, so it doesn't make it as, like, intimidating. But it's just people that you normally maybe wouldn't cross paths with. all of like these two girls that we have found, they are also women who follow Jesus. And so we get to have deep conversations about it. We're going to start a Bible study group together. It's been amazing. But another way that God has just like really shown up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you.
I love that. And it kind of goes along with your earlier point of we feel alone. Like a lot of
Yeah.
us feel alone and we're waiting for somebody to reach out. But I think as women, it's so easy to get in our own heads and just be like, oh, nobody wants to hang out with me, or people are making plans without me. And that we forget that everybody's just waiting for somebody to
Yeah.
make the first move, like even in friendship. And so it's so true. Like if you don't have a community, there are so many ways to get connected, whether it's a church or the Peanut app or Bumble or whatever. I'm
Oh,
really
yeah.
glad you brought that up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it makes such a huge difference to just have people who are walking with you and who are on the faith journey together. Like, obviously, none of us have this figured out. So it helps to have other people in the process with you.
Yeah, and we were designed to also have community. Like we were not designed to go through this life alone. And I mean, honestly, like when I've had my days where I'm just like sitting and doing business stuff and not really like reaching out to friends to hang out, and then versus when I do actually have my few girls that I get together with and just go have like a nice like 2 hour chat and coffee, it like just like my mood is different.
Yes,
And so I'm just like, wow, like this is really important to really have this community and make this a priority. Like, even if it's once or twice a week or once a month, whatever you have time for, it's just so important to have that.
I completely agree. Makes such a huge difference and it makes us stronger.
Yes.
So, with that being said, I would love to know before we leave if there's any advice that you would give to somebody who wants to develop a stronger habit of depending on God in daily life, but they either really struggle with letting go,
Yeah.
which same, or just isn't really sure where to start.
I would say if you're really wanting to know where to start with like really developing that like strong habit of like depending on God, I would just start by honestly, like it doesn't have to be anything crazy, but just starting your day with talking to God. Even if you don't know what to say, like just start talking about like maybe like how you're feeling. Like if it's like a hard day, you can talk about that. Or if you're thankful for something that has happened in your life, just like thank God for that. But just starting with that, just again, like it gets your mind on God for the day. And then I feel like once you start making those habits of talking with God, and then you just kind of start to really like depend and like really start forming that relationship when you just kind of have that more active prayer lifestyle.
Yeah, I love that because I feel like the more that you do it, the more you want to do it. Like it's kind of like going to the gym, at first it's miserable and you're not motivated. And then after a while, you feel yourself getting stronger and it's like you almost crave that. That's how I found it to be in my relationship with the Lord as well.
Yeah. And then I would also say, like, once you kind of start doing that, then I would say, like, you can, like, do devotionals or getting in the Bible, because even like being in the Word, like, that really helps you get to know God and just understanding who God is and how good He is. And then having that along with prayer, like, it just really helps you to build that dependence.
That's such good advice. I love how you help women and especially moms because it is so easy for us to feel alone. And so I love how the work you're doing is to support women and help them know someone is in their corner and sees them
Yes,
and is praying for them and walking with them, committed to the process. But seriously, Danielle, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story and for all you do.
of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to tune into another episode of the Byword Show. I love having you here and I'm so thankful for your support. Don't forget to share a screenshot of this episode to let me know you were here. I can't wait to talk again soon, but in the meantime, be sure to come hang out with me on Instagram and remember, I am cheering you on.